In this episode, we're going to be talking about a really important principle of micromanaging flying units, especially in StarCraft, and it is called the Magic Box. So I'm going to select 11 Mutalisks. Now, if I tell these Mutalisks to move somewhere, then you'll see the Mutalisks maintain roughly the same formation that they were in as they arrive at their destination. So we've got a cluster of Mutalisks here. They move them over here. They're staying in roughly the same formation. They're staying fairly spread out. Now, this can be a problem. I mentioned in an earlier video on micromanagement that you want to target down enemy units as much as possible. If my Mutalisks are spread out like this, it's pretty easy for an enemy to take their air units, their anti-air units, and to right-click on one Mutalisk and target it down. We don't want them to be able to do that. But the reason that the Mutalisks are staying in formation is because of this thing that we call the Magic Box, which determines how flyers make decisions on their movement. Ordinarily, if all the flyers are close enough together, if they are inside the Magic Box, so to speak, then the formation will be roughly maintained as they move around. But if we have something in our selection that is far away from the rest of the group, if it's outside the so-called Magic Box, then the formation is not going to be maintained anymore. If I select this Mutalisk, who is a long distance away from the rest of the group, and I right-click over here, then you can notice the Mutalisks aren't keeping their formation, they're getting closer together, and as they reach the destination, they're pretty tightly clumped up. And that makes it a lot harder for the enemy to target one specific Mutalisk from this group. But you also notice that as I selected that one extra Mutalisk and joined it into my group so as to break the Magic Box, that Mutalisk also ended up at my destination point, and now, if I try to select all my Mutalisks again and tell them to go somewhere, well, I don't have a unit outside the Magic Box anymore. All these flyers are close together, so we're maintaining formations. We're not getting that tightly clustering behavior that we really want. So there are more consistent ways to keep your units stacking on top of each other. This only works with air units, of course, because ground units can't occupy the same physical space. As a Zerg, there are about 3 different ways you can do this. One of them is select a lava in the same group as your flyers that you're moving around. The lava is always going to be a long distance away from these Mutalisks. The lava is never going to move over and join the mutas. And you can see I'm getting my mutas very tightly stacked together now by doing this. I'm just right-clicking them on the ground and telling them to run around with something that's in the control group that isn't close to all the other units. And they will automatically stack up like this. The problem with using a lava for the job is when you turn the lava into another unit... Okay, I need to give myself some money. When you turn the lava into another unit, the lava removes from the control group, and you're not getting your Magic Box effect anymore. In fact, you can see the Mutalisks are spreading out as I fly them around, which we don't want. So larvae are great because they don't move, and you'll often have them, but if you're spending your larvae on building lots of units, you might not have a lava available at the time you need to use a Magic Box. A second option is Overlords. Group an Overlord with your other flyers to break the Magic Box and to get your Mutalisks to all stack on top of each other. The problem with this, the advantage of this is you always have Overlords as a Zerg player, and Overlords move slowly early on in the game because you don't have the Overlord speed upgrade yet. The disadvantage is, of course, the Overlord will still eventually follow your Mutalisks and get to where they are, so you need to keep going back to your base and removing this Overlord from your control group and adding another Overlord instead, so that you never have any of your Overlords head too far across the map and get in danger. A third option is to research the Burrow upgrade, borrow a unit, and select that unit into your control group and use that to break the Magic Box. Now, the advantage of using a borrowed unit for the job is it's never gonna catch up with your Mutalisks, so you don't have to deal with the maintenance of switching units in and out of your control group to make sure they don't run across the map following the Mutalisks as you're microing around. And unlike a lava, you're never going to use it to build another unit type. The disadvantage is you have to spend resources on researching Borrow, and then you have to have a unit, probably a Zergling, who is sitting underground doing nothing to allow you to do this micromanagement. And especially in a Zerg versus Zerg 1v1 game, you often don't have those resources to spare. But there are a lot of ways that you can accomplish this air units stacking tightly on top of each other, which we call breaking the magic box. So, I already mentioned that one reason this is good is because it makes it hard for the enemy to target specifically one of your units. But there are other reasons this is helpful. It allows you to micromanage your units more effectively against enemies. We've got a cluster of Marines over here. Now, if I just A-move my Mutalisks in among these Marines, they do okay. They would destroy all the Marines, but you take a lot of losses in the process. But if I have all my Mutalisks grouped up like this, then I can keep them away from most of the Marines. I can try to attack a position where only some, but not all, of the Marine force is in position to attack me. Notice only a few of the front Marines are attacking my Mutalisks. The ones at the back aren't getting close enough to attack. And I can run my Mutalisks in, and then I can fly my Mutalisks in and out, so that the Marines don't get to attack them all the time, target down specific Marines one by one. And this allows me to take much better trades against the enemy than I would have been able to do if I just A-moved my Mutalisks and wasn't thinking about this. The fact that the Mutalisks are all stacked together means I can get all of them to fire at the same target at the same time, so they do enough damage to kill the Marines, to kill the Marine I target almost instantly. This also means that if this Terran player had medics to heal their Marines with, the medics wouldn't get time to heal the Marine I'm targeting, because all the damage from all the Mutalisks is arriving all at once. So, you will most often see this magic box technique with a Zerg player who is using their Mutalisks, but it works for all the flyers in the game. So if I instead take some Terran Wraiths, I can get the same results. You'll see the Wraiths are keeping roughly the same formation as I just right-click them around. They're not getting closer together, they're not tightening up. But if I have something else, for instance an SCV who's trapped behind some buildings, that I join into my control group, and then I start telling the Wraiths to move around, now they are clumping tightly together, same way the Mutalisks were. And I can micromanage them in much the same way I did with those Mutalisks. Again, there's a couple of enemy Marines over near here, somewhere. There they are. And I can target down the Marines one by one. I am just right-clicking here. I'm not left-clicking on the ground or on the enemies. I'm just right-clicking to move and right-clicking on the Marine I want to target. I'm also using high ground here. I'm flying my Wraiths back and forth over this cliff, so that the Marines can't always see them, because of course they don't have vision of the high ground all the time, since they are just ground units on low ground. And this allows me to take down the Marines with far fewer losses than I would have sustained if I had just A-moved my Wraiths at that Marine force. Because the Marines can't easily target a specific Wraith, and because I can pick off individual Marines one by one and thus reduce the damage they're doing. The same principle also applies to Protoss. You'll most often see this magic box technique done with Corsairs as a Protoss player. Again, it only works on air units, not on ground units. And if I have a probe who's trapped behind some buildings, just like that trapped SCV, then I can get my Corsairs to bunch very tightly together. Terran and Protoss, the main way you do this is by trapping a worker behind some buildings, because they don't have an equivalent of larvae and they don't have overlords that they use to get their supply. Now, I could just demonstrate magic boxing with Corsairs, but I'm going to demonstrate something else. I am going to demonstrate firing while moving for air units. You'll notice, if I have my Corsairs attack these other Corsairs here, they stop moving. They come to a stop once I start telling them to attack this target. And that happens when you attack enemy units too. Units in StarCraft, air units, will not naturally attack enemies while they are moving around. And air units can fly pretty fast. But if I tell my units to move get close to an enemy, tell them to attack, and tell them to start moving again. Get close to an enemy, tell them to attack, and tell them to start moving again. And I do that very quickly, then I can have my Corsairs attack an enemy periodically while they're also chasing it and flying after it. And so the enemy, if they move at about the same speed as my Corsairs do, isn't going to be able to escape before I can take them down. I'm going to demonstrate this with some Mutalisks over here. Here they are. So I'm going to get the Corsairs involved in fighting these Mutalisks. Where are the Mutalisks? There we are. There's the rest of them. And we're going to be very careful. We want to be ready for when the Mutalisks start to run away. Which they will be doing soon. There they go. Okay. So now I'm going to have my Corsairs chase the Mutas, and I'm going to be running, attack. Running, attack. Running, attack. And as I keep doing this, one of the Mutalisks dies, and now I'm going to go for the next one. And so I'm actually getting kills on the enemy units as they flee from me. This is kind of difficult to do, as you can see, and I have a lot of horizontal space to play with to get this done. And now I'm going to win the fight now that we've arrived at the other side of the map. But this is a useful technique to have. There are some matchups in StarCraft where having a slight advantage, especially in flying units, can result in you winning the fight in a landslide, and the enemy will try to run away when they realize that. But if you can chase them down and kill more of their units as they flee, then you can make your advantage even more substantial. You'd mainly seen this with Corsairs versus Mutalisks, and with Mutalisk versus Mutalisks in Zerg versus Zerg. But sometimes in a couple of other matchups. So, those are some really useful techniques in controlling flying units that can be very helpful to know in terms of how effective you can make your flyers.